here at a somber occasion, but it's hard to talk about Brian without having a little joy in your heart. He was a very happy person. And from the very beginning, one of the happiest persons was his mother, Renee, because every summer she would package them up and ship them to my house. And I would normally get a phone call because you never knew exactly when they were coming. More importantly, you never knew when they were leaving. And Renee would call and say, "Hey, I know you all were waiting to see your nephews." What nephews would that be? And one of the funniest things about them, especially Brian and Gerard, they were a package deal. You didn't get one without the other. You got both at the same time. And normally you would get schooled that year. Whatever they had learned, you were taught. One of the things I was taught was they had started watching videos. And I think it was Bruce Willis, Die Hard. I learned to hate that movie. I learned to hate it because Brian and Gerard had gotten it on the video where there was certain little 30 seconds of the movie that they would like to hear. So you'd be watching the movie and all the zip, it'd zip by 25 minutes. And then for the next half hour, they just keep playing the same half hour over and over and over again. And we would have little discussions when they came down. This was my opportunity to deprogram them from everything Renee had taught them. Because, in my opinion, being an uncle, I knew better. And they would come down with these various thoughts and things of that nature. One of the things that Brian would do, they had this thing, during that time, all of the young men liked to wear baggy pants. I couldn't stand that. I thought it was just sinful. This is ridiculous. If my father was alive, he would take my hand in this. It would be stopped. I thought it was my duty to stop it. It wasn't any good. But what came out of it was compromise. So, when Brian had gotten old enough to sort of work for me and Gerard worked for me, I had sort of given them a choice. I said, you can dress like people that work outside, and I'm going to give you outside. Or you could dress like somebody who works in an office, and I'll give you office work. And kids being kids, they ignored me the first day. So that day I decided that I needed to have a garden in my backyard. And I remember the day I took them out and staked it off and everything. And Brian had this thing where he would sort of shake his head. Y'all doing, Brian would look at someone, he's like, sort of like do this little thing like does not compute. And for years after that, he would ask me, "How's the garden doing?" And I would just say, "Great." I never planted anything, but you could see when they had dug the rows and everything up. But probably his most familiar memory for me was when he was, I don't know if he was even a year old at the time. But Renee, you talk to Renee and she would tell you, "Oh my gosh, he's a genius. He turned over all by himself," etc. And Kevin and I would listen to this, okay, newborn child, man, we gotta endure this. And what had happened is that there was a little magnetic thing that you stuck up on a board or something like that. And somehow Brian had managed to arrange, there's a little rectangle. And it was in the form of a computer. And Renee was just proclaiming to anybody that had 30 seconds to listen to her that he had built a computer. See what Brian has done? He built this computer. It's on the thing, and being Harris's, you couldn't grow up to be Harris's and have feeling. You were going to be kind of tough on your feelings because you were going to catch it all day for something. And we immediately started saying, "Yeah, Brian must be some kind of a genius." And he sort of built this thing, and we were all marveling at it, and there was this little plastic egg, and somehow he managed to get a hold of that and popped it in his mouth. And you hear as he was trying to breathe, I said, "I think that boy cannot breathe with that egg in his mouth. He about to choke himself. And that was the first inkling that we had that he had some interest in computers. And it's really, truly amazing because from that moment forward, proceed forward to 30, 25 years or so, he builds his own company, he goes to UVA, majors in computer, cognitive sciences, and things of that nature. And he builds his whole career around that. And I was really impressed by it because he was a person who showed very early on an aptitude for doing what others could not do, or he showed some true interest in things that were above and beyond his age. But finally, I think probably my favorite story about him was every year I would buy a present for Brian Gerard. And normally the present was something that I liked. Because I was getting to the point I was too old to buy myself toys. So I could say I was buying for Brian Gerard. So I would always buy him a video game or something of that nature. This particular year, I got the Mortal Kombat. It was a Sega system, Mortal Kombat. And I brought it up there because I'd always wanted to play the game. And I had given it to them, and I came up and gave it to them, and off I went, and they went off playing it. And they came down for one particular holiday, and I was sort of preparing for them because I had noted that Brian had begun to beat me in this game. I couldn't beat him. So I called his mother and said, Renee, to look around, somewhere they got a cheat sheet around there. And I want you to fax me, this is how long ago it was, fax me the cheat sheet. And they found the cheat sheet and faxed it down to me for I guess the next week. I picked a character and I just started playing that character. Brian Gerard came down and all of their little possessions, they would always come down and there would always be a whole bag of stuff that just followed them wherever they went. All their toys, their favorite food, the juice box, and everything else that, accompanied them. And so they came down and they got all set up, and I remember Brian sort of, and I don't know, it might have been maybe he was 11, I don't know. But he got himself all set up, come here, you want to come back? Because they were looking forward to beating me. I was like, well, I don't know, I guess I'll get in the game or two. Go ahead and set it up. So we set the thing up, and I had been practicing religiously all week. I had been waiting for this moment. Brian set it up, and he had Liu Kang, I think one of his people. Brian had 5 or 6 people. I had one guy. I had been working on him all week waiting for this. And the game started. I jumped in the game and just went back and forth, and I beat him. Gerard looked over and said, Brian, Uncle Mike beat you. And Brian did that little thing he does when you look. That's not the computer. You see his eyes crossing. This doesn't make any sense. He said, Brian, you want to play again, Mike? Yeah, I'll play again. We played a second time. I just barely got it. I just squeezed out. When I say I barely beat my mean, I just barely squeezed by. And while I was squeaking, Gerard found a cheat sheet. And he declared, Brian, they got the cheat sheet over here. Mom faxed in the cheat sheet. As soon as she said that, it was like something just, a whole nother persona took over. He took his cap and turned it backward. It was, Brian was serious then. That's when I quit. I said, Brian, I want to tell you this and I want you to listen to me because this is important. I will never play you again. Never. But as long as there is a game, I will always be able to tell everyone that I beat you. And there's nothing you can do about it because I will never play you again.
Children. So in our family, we were perhaps a different, can't read my writing, but so in our family, we had perhaps a different sort of relationship when it came to my sister's sons, Brian and Gerard. You know, as the only kids in our immediate family, like holidays, birthdays, family celebrations, most often revolved around them. Whether it was a family conversation, a religious discussion, political argument, current events, they were always involved in adult conversations at an early age, and we encouraged them to form and articulate their own opinions. When they were younger, you know, aside from those family get-togethers, I didn't spend a lot of time with them because my sister was in Jersey, and me and my brother were here in D.C., Maryland, Virginia area. But there were a few times when they came up and they actually stayed with me, as opposed to my under, of course, the same strong encouragement of my sister with the adage, you know, you need to spend more time bonding with your nephews. I said, okay. Translation, she needed a break. So that was fun with me because that gave me a chance to, you know, become fun. You know, I didn't make them work as much as Michael. I don't think I made them work at all. So I would take them around the parks, you know, play catch, eat fast food, you know, watch movies, no real bedtime, that sort of stuff. So when they got a little bit older and became interested in sports, you know, I would take them around to the different courts in the area, you know, and gradually going from the easier, more kind of mild-mannered pickup games, you know, out in like Maryland, Virginia. Then we get to more serious courts like in the hood in D.C., specifically the court across the street from Howard University where I went to school, and I knew that they could, you know, hit a good run and kind of test their skills, because both of them were interested in basketball, against some of the local street ballers, and they definitely were able to hold their own. Just a sidebar, I remember Gerard, he was actually shorter than Brian at the time. He had like the slowest crossover ever. But for some reason it still worked on people. So. But even, you know, in my role as a fun uncle, I wanted to kind of expose them to the world of business and begin to kind of spark that entrepreneurial spirit that Harrises are known for. So on occasion, I would take them with me to, you know, at the time I was doing architecture, take them to my office, and then other times I would take them to, you know, different business or entrepreneurial sort of events. Like, I remember one time I took them to a real estate foreclosure auction, and you know, Brian was very inquisitive about what was going on, why are these people leaving their house, and that sort of thing. So I was able to kind of explain to him, you know, some business and just how things, you know, work somewhat in the real world. But however, once Brian started going to UVA, I would see them a little bit more. You know, sometimes I get that random call when he was in D.C. with his friends, or, you know, if I was going out of town, occasionally he would ask to stay at my penthouse apartment when I was, you know, living downtown on 701 Pennsylvania Avenue. And of course, I had to give him the lecture, you know, respect my place. You know, I don't want any bad news when I came back. But to his credit, you know, I would never hear anything negative. You know, no trouble, no complaints about building management. You know, Brian, you know, he was always very thoughtful and respectful. So then after he graduated, you know, he decided to stay in this area. He took a job, one of the many government contractors in this area. I think it was Northrop Grumman, I can't remember, doing IT, highly classified organizations. So I started to see him a little bit more often, but then a few years later, you know, when he began to contemplate starting his own business, you know, our relationship began to change a little bit. And I kind of went from uncle to, you know, a mentor a bit because, and he would ask me questions about business and government contracting and things that he was interested in. Because at that time, you know, I was working with firms that were doing And so I was glad to share that information with him. He wanted my opinion on certain things, and we started to build, sort of a different relationship. Things like how to start a business, how to structure it, how to negotiate contracts, so forth and so on. So of course I gave him the best advice I could at the time. I also, introduced him to folks in my network, because again, I saw that passion in him to, take things to that next level. So I let him know that I would help him in any way I could. He just needed to ask. So then after starting his business, whenever we would talk, I would typically, or the conversation would typically go to his business. How are things going? How are the contracts? We kind of had something we could talk about, we had interest in, that we could kind of connect with because we had similar backgrounds. And then I would generally give him some unsolicited advice or recommendations, even though it was pretty clear at that point he didn't really need it because he was doing very well. But he had kind of gone from my little nephew who I would, play catch with in the front yard to this very astute business colleague and almost like a friend. So I was just so very proud of him that he had put in the work to make his dreams come true. And reality, it became true. Put in the work to make his dream become reality, and became a success. But I was even more proud of the man my nephew had become. I remember the joy I would get when I would be able to introduce my associates and friends to him, and I would say, hey, this is my nephew. And they would have that, kind of look on their face like, this is your nephew? Because he's like this much taller than me. It's like he's much more impressive than you are. But, even to this day, folks who I introduced Brian to years and years ago, when I talked to them, they still ask me, how's your nephew doing? Because he was the type of person, he made such a lasting impression on everybody that he met. So, in closing, I'm not the type of person who posts on Facebook, but I felt the need for some reason to write something on Facebook. So I'm going to just read you a little bit of it before I turn over the mic. And it said, it feels like a dream that I keep trying to wake up from. I still cannot believe that my nephew, Patrick Barrett, has passed away. So suddenly and mysteriously, doctors don't know what took him from us. I don't typically post stuff like this, but I feel so strongly that I need to honor him in some way. He was so young and accomplished during his short time on this earth. A businessman, an entrepreneur, a scholar, a musician, an athlete, a philanthropist. My nephew was thoughtful, he was caring, he was kind, and just overall good man. I don't understand why this happened.